there, welcome to Travels with Geordie. My name is Peter and I live on a wooden boat in Victoria, British Columbia, very much like this one, with my pup Geordie. How are you there, buddy? How are you sitting in the sun? Gorgeous day. Well, when I say very much like this one, it's because some of you may recognize this boat as MV Zephyrus, my friend's boat just down the dock, which I've been helping her do some work on, and she's away this week, so it's a good time for me to catch up with some of the things that I'd wanted to get done before the boat can be taken cruising. If you remember, we took it downtown for the Christmas holidays, which was just around the corner, but as you can see, there are no instruments, no switches, and really the wiring is barely holding itself together. So this is a day of getting some more electrical stuff done. Stay tuned. So there's a lot I want to get done this week. As you saw, the instrument panel is basically empty with the exception of the stop cable, which does function, and the Morse controls, which do function. Now, there's room for 6 gauges and 12 switches. There were 9, and these were 3 lights because these were the bilge pump. But I'm not quite sure how I'm going to arrange it right now. I have all the original switches. They're all in great shape. So I'm going to try to figure out what I'm going to use these 9 12 holes for. They have old labels on them which were rather crudely done with, I don't know if you remember those old Dymo labelers from the 60s and 70s that was stuck in the mold when they made this. They're kind of crude, they're impossible to read, and they don't apply. For instance, we have turbo and a few things here on the instruments. So I know what's going in the instruments, and we'll talk about that later. The tack is a problem because, well, it's not functional, but it fills the hole nicely for now, and there's no tack drive on the engine, so we have to deal with that. We also have the main panel here, which is not dealt with yet. I can't close it because I got a wire hanging out of there. The AC side is just temporarily wired up. Well, let's open it up. You can see the mess we got going in here. So we got AC circuits coming in just temporarily. They're properly wired to the panel, but I'm going to do them a lot neater. The DC is all on one circuit for now because the only thing that's running is basically lighting. So lots to be done there. Plus there's some more gauges and switches that'll go in this part of these panels. For instance, the fuel gauges will go there. How about this fantastic retro AC voltmeter for line voltage? I just love this thing. At first I got to test it and make sure it works. Anyway, lots to do, lots to do. Hey, alright, an unboxing. This is a box from Summit Racing Equipment. This, if you're a male in North America between the ages of 40 and 70, you're familiar with Summit. Summit was like the original big mail order house for aftermarket hot rod parts for cars. Of course, there were many others, and I can't remember them. But as a kid, I used to love the prospect of, you know, ordering some parts from Summit. So I don't know how many boating channels actually get stuff from Summit Racing, but let's have a look at what's in this box. What we have in here is big fluffy airbags, gauges, sweet, beautiful video gauges, and their monster catalog. I just have to show you this catalog. Hang on a sec. I don't know how many companies, mail order companies in the era of Amazon still publish these massive half-inch thick full catalogs. I used to pore over these as a kid. I mean, unbelievable stuff in here. I have no use for it today, but oh, that's a blast from the past for me. Okay, so what we have here, new gauges for MV Zephyrus. Voltmeter. This is a vacuum gauge, and I'll tell you what that's going to be about in a minute. Transmission pressure, oil pressure for the transmission, and they go along with the gauges we already had, which is water temperature and oil pressure. Now you're counting 5 and you see 6 holes. Let me explain. The final gauge in this group will be the depth gauge. Now this is a really cheap through hull sender, but it works. It's functional, and for now it's all we can really do until we rehaul the boat and can change a new transducer on the bottom. Anyway, it'll fill the last hole, and I don't know what we'll do in the long run about a depth sounder, but this will do for now. Okay, let's go. I love these mounts, spin-off mounts. So simple, so nice to work with. Okay. Engine temperature, love it. Engine oil pressure, love it. Transmission oil pressure. Love it. Voltmeter. Love it. Woohoo! And a vacuum gauge. Oddly enough, this still uses the old mount style, but I still love it. And finally, the depth sounder gauge. Okay, so that doesn't look that bad. It's certainly not retro. It would have been fun to get some real vintage gauges for here, but these are very high quality gauges at a reasonable price, and I think even having the depth sounder in there works okay. You'll notice the absence of an ammeter. Most engine, let's say car instrument panels, I would always include a voltmeter and an ammeter. But on a boat, that's less relevant. With dual battery banks and you're basically managing the power on a house, a completely dedicated battery management system or monitoring system is more appropriate than a simple engine 30 amp minus, 30 amp plus, or 60 or whatever you can get. I don't think that's really as appropriate in this case. So before we can get half of these gauges to work, we need to be able to connect them to the engine. Well, some of them are electrical. They obviously, the voltmeter is pretty straightforward. You just connect it to the volt system. The oil pressure uses a sender. The temperature uses a sender, and the vacuum gauge is manual. The transmission pressure is manual, so they all connect to fittings. So let me describe what's going on here. Let's start really at the back here. Here's the transmission. This is the selector gear. You remember all this. This copper line here, which I've just crimped off, is the transmission pressure port. So I have to be able to connect this to the back of the transmission pressure gauge. So that is basically going to be a couple of brass fittings and some nylon tubing that will work forward. I haven't bought that stuff yet, so I want to make sure I can take this stuff off and have a look at how that's going to go. Now if we move forward, this is the back of the engine. If those of you who remember that I couldn't put the temperature sensor on the front, I'm going to put it on the back, and it can go on this plate. It's relatively common on the Perkins to do it that way. This is actually another port. It's plugged for the heater, which isn't used right now. So I have to take this plate off, drill it, and tap it for the temperature sensor that goes right there. So we'll do that today. Further forward, these are the fuel filters, the Racors. There's twin, as I explained. So the vacuum gauge has to go between this point and the fuel pump, which is through this hose here, and it goes around there. So basically I'm going to put another T in below here, a small T, and another short nylon line that will go forward to the instrument cluster. And then further forward, here you can see the temporary oil pressure gauge that I had on to make sure that the engine had pressure, and down behind it here you can see the port on the engine where the oil pressure gauge goes, and I'm going to replace that with the oil pressure sender for the gauge that goes in the instrument cluster. And that's about it. Okay, so I'm going to take off the rear plate off the back of the cylinder head. I'm not going to try and film that. I don't think you'd find that particularly interesting. Let's go. Alright, so here we go. Here's the plate off, and I'm going to put the temperature sensor right there. And the reason is that there's huge studs right behind there and right behind there in the head. And there's a void here where the this fitting already is, but there's a good sized void here, and it seems kind of tidy. This is the little critter that's going in there. Some of you will remember it from what I tried to put into the front of the engine. So that's going to go right there. Now you'll see it has an 8-inch pipe thread on it. Happily, my cheapo tap and die set includes an 8-inch tap. Now, to pre-drill it, technically an 1/8 inch takes a size Q letter drill. Well, I don't have a set of letter drills. I mean, who does? Anyway, so the equivalent is about 5/16, a little bit smaller. So I'm going to do a test in this piece of aluminum to make darn sure I get a really nice thread for that fitting before I commit to the cast iron, to the steel plate. All right. Cheap tap set holders. Fortunately I have a decent holder we can do this with. Okay, so I'm not really sure how it fares as a cutting oil, but fluid film is so good for everything. Oh gosh, that feels great. There we go. Let's see how that feels for the sender. Nice, very nice. Okay. So, that works out well. Right about there. Okay. I actually love tapping and dyeing things. I love the satisfying cutting. Now because it's a tapered thread, I don't want to go too far with the first pass, just in case the taper on the sender isn't equivalent. So let's see how that feels. I get any swarf out of there, we don't get it on the sender. Feels good. I might not go any further because there's full thread engagement there and there's only a few threads back here. I don't want to be in a position where I run out of threads. I want that good seal on that. So I'm going to call that good. The other thing is I can't use any sealant on this because the metal-to-metal contact between the sender and the plate is the ground, which is the return for the sender. There's only one terminal on here, so I have to maintain an electrical ground here, as well as from this to the engine. So I'm going to have to clean these up a bit, make sure there's a good ground. Because of course there's a gasket in here. And back aboard Zephyrus to install it. Now, some of you are saying, you're screaming at the screen going, Peter, that's a cheap automotive style sender, and it's true, it is. It's a single terminal using the ground as the return for it. You can get marine senders that basically have two terminals on them and the actual body of the sender is isolated from the terminal. That's really great if you're going to do a ground isolated engine, which is an interesting thing, and we'll talk about that in the future, but I just don't think it's worth it, the incredible extra cost for a simple installation, which this is, a budget minded installation, which this is. Okay, let me get this back on. Actually, I was amazed to see when I just made this up and tried to clean up the existing gasket on the engine. There is no gasket on the engine. So it must have just had some goop on there to begin with. I'm sure there is a genuine gasket on this, and whoever took it off last time didn't have one. So I'm doing the same thing. We'll see. Hopefully it doesn't leak. Yeah. And there we go. It looks like it was meant to be there. Let's connect it up. Okay, so let's get this manual gauge off of here. It's a good thing to have if you're ever going to look at an engine or test an engine. A manual oil pressure gauge, definitely very, very handy. Now, I don't know how much of this you can see, especially if I put my head in the way. But let's get this off of here. Again, another 1/8" pipe thread. And that comes off. Now what I do is I keep my hand here, gosh forbid that wants to trickle oil, although it shouldn't because all the oil should be in the pan, but depending on the way the oil galleries are made right there's always a chance something will trickle out. So this little bugger here is the sender for the oil pressure, and it just screws right into that, as you can imagine. Now this has a single terminal on it, but you see it's still the same casting that would be the dual terminal version of this, although it's 3 times the price. Anyway, makes it super easy to install. It's just a little thumb screw for a ring connector. So let's get this on and get it wired up. And happily no oil is pouring out of there. Good. Now some of you will remember that I brought down a 3-strand wire cable for start, oil pressure, and temperature sensor. And so these are the 2 remaining wires. I guess I'll use black for oil pressure. Black for oil, right? This is actually AC wire, but there are a few cases on the boat where I'm perfectly willing to use AC 3-strand as long as I document it well. So let's get some terminals on here. Oil gets a ring connector, and the water temperature, believe it or not, gets a spade, and I'll show not a spade but a 1/4" quick disconnect, and I'll show you how that works. Okay, so now both of these wires are going to get some significant strain relief shortly, but this is just a test install to make sure everything's working before I commit to connecting it all up. Now, very obscure. Let's bring you back here if I can get... Any chance I can get the tripod to sort of stand anywhere around here? Perhaps I can. How about that? Okay, now, you've noticed the obscure terminal on the end of the temperature sensor from VDO. Well, it took a little research, but the only way to connect to that is with a quick connect on sideways. Very, very strange. So what I have to do is trim out the plastic insulator off the side of it so that the pin can slide in, and it slides into the head of the quick connect like that. and I guess that's a connection. I'm not crazy about it. A whole bunch of strain relief and a whole bunch of silicone grease, and I think that will be okay, but that's the way it's done. So here we go. I've made up some temporary pigtails for the temperature and oil pressure. So we're going to say positive is white. And again, these are temporary, but at least robust enough that I don't have to worry about them for the next little while anyway. Okay, and we'll do oil. Right. Connect them down underneath the helm, and we'll get to it. Ooh, put these super cool rings on first. So I'm just putting the switches back in for now. Strangely enough, just so that I can think about how I want to use them. You can see I put 3 lights in the holes that used to have lights. It may be that I just go back and leave these 3 switches as the 3 overrides for the bilge pump. There's something nice about having these lights up on the helm and seeing them come on every time the bilge pump goes on. You're, wherever you are in the boat, you can say, oh, okay, well that's about the right pattern. So yeah, it may be that that's the way it stays. I'm not sure, but anyway, I'm not going to get much more of this done today as I'm running a little long, but it'll allow me to think a little more about it. I'm not sure how I feel about these lights. They're relatively simple, straightforward LEDs, economical, reliable. Anyway, I'm going to light one up and see what I think of them. I really like these switches. They're straightforward, easy to turn them all off at once. I'm going to wire one up with this light for the bilge pump and just see how I feel about it. Okay, here, so just a mock-up bilge pump. There's no water in the bilge right now, so it doesn't pump anything, but that light will also come on if the float switch turns it on. And so we have 3 bilge pumps. There's one in the forecastle, there's one in the engine bay, and there's one in the galley, basically. And this is the way the boat was set up before, and I think I'm going to leave it like that, with these 3 lights, exactly like that. That gives me 6 switches for everything else, which is plenty. And again, whatever. It'll do for now. Well, that just about wraps it up for today, but it is Friday, it is sunny, and it is quitting time. So you know what that means. End of a long day and it's time for a beer, and that's true. However, I haven't eaten a darn thing all day and I'm starving. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to show you one of the little things I eat regularly aboard, and that is what's called a croque madame, kind of polluted and destroyed in North America as the Egg McMuffin. Really yummy though if you make it right. Okay folks, this is an absolute delicacy if you do it right. What you need is an English muffin, an egg, really nice egg hopefully, a really nice slab of fantastic thick bacon, some butter, more butter than you can possibly imagine, some really sharp cheddar cheese, and a little spot of cream. And so let's go. Now the nice thing about it is it a 1-pan meal. For gosh sake, use some good bacon, because if you're going to use some cheap grocery store bacon, use 3 or 4 slices. Okay, when the bacon's basically done, hang on to it because it's going to stay in the pan. Pour off your excess fat. There you go. And it's really handy if you know which way your boat leans. Mine leans that way, so I'm going to tuck the bacon up in that corner and throw some butter down in this corner. There we go. Maybe a little more. Butter's such good stuff. Okay, going into that butter is the English muffin. I don't know why people butter surfaces of bread when they're going to fry it rather than just putting loads of butter in the pan and letting it soak up. Oh, so good, so nice. Oh yeah. Okay, so we wait another little bit for this to get yummy yummy. So while the English muffins are getting nice and crispy, we'll mix up the egg. So basically just 1 whole egg. Look how beautiful and dark that yolk is. And a little dollop of cream, roughly the same amount as the yolk. And just give them a quick little mix. There we go. Doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, it's better if it isn't. These are about ready. Let's have a look-see. Oh, getting there, not quite. Oh, just about. So yummy. Oh, they're getting perfect, nice and crispy. What you're looking for is different textures. The soft egg, the crispy English muffin, the chewy bacon. It's going to be fantastic. Now we just push these to the side a bit so they stay warm over there. Add a little more beautiful, beautiful butter. Not too much. And what we're going to do now is really cheat on the on the sloped pan thing a bit. I'm going to put that right there. Careful, this burner is still on, so I got to be careful I don't get it mega hot. Pour the egg in. There we go. Okay, so while the egg is starting to harden up a little bit, I just take some little bits of really sharp cheddar and just shake them right, cut them right in on top of that. They'll end up in this sort of omelette-y, cheesy, I don't know what this really is, souffle type of thing. It's going to be so yummy. But lots of sharp cheddar is so good. All right, good. When it's sort of solid up again, you can bring it back onto the heat. So we'll start to plate this up. Basically a lower English muffin, upper English muffin, 2 pieces of bacon, so yummy, yummy, yummy. And start to flip this egg over on itself a little bit. Oh, so good, so good. Still tilting the pan just enough to make sure that it stays somewhat together. Oh, that's going to be so yummy. Cheese, some of the cheese is coming off the end and melting. If you don't handle it too much, the egg will get nice and fluffy. One more thing, a reasonably indulgent lump of mayonnaise makes this just perfect. Okay, so maybe give this one flip, but only for a few seconds. And we'll call that done. And on to the English muffin. Fold it under, fold it over, do whatever you need to get it all on there. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Good load of fresh ground pepper, and I mean lots. Oh yeah, there we go. Absolutely delicious. Oh, that's just divine. Mmm. Crispy. Yummy. Mmm. You know what this needs? And yes, folks, the beer of the week this week is Dark Matter by Hoyne Brewery, also here, microbrewery here in Victoria. This is really kind of a fun beer. I don't even know what kind of beer it is. I don't know if it's an ale, a lager, I don't even know. And I went on the website and it doesn't say. Basically, there's a long write-up about how dark matter, the particles of energy, a kind of fun play on. Anyway, this beer is interesting because it's largely available at festivals. Every music festival, boat festival, whatever I've been to, Hoyne seems to be the brewer of choice there. So this also pours very carbonated, so I have chilled a glass. Oh, nice and dark. I don't know if you can see that there. It's not hoppy at all, quite malty, and obviously must be a roasted barley to get that color. We'll pour just a little ahead. The cold glass really made a difference. There we go. Doesn't a frosty glass look beautiful? Cheers. Oh, hot damn, that is a damn good beer. I keep forgetting, I don't drink enough of this stuff. Fantastic. Anyway, so what I'll do is take this opportunity to cheers and say very much thank you to this week's new patrons, who are Philip Hilgersom, Wendell Brunk, and Steve Hankinson. That's just not fair. Philip Hilgersom, Wendell Brunk, and Steve Hankerson. I think I got that right. Anyway, thanks so much to the 3 of you. So grateful. And cheers. See you next week. Gosh darn it, this is an okay life.